Hi, today I'd like to talk to you about a rather interesting trial that has been going on in New York. The story for the US audience actually started in March 2016 when an Iranian and Turkish dual citizen, originally from Iran, Reza Zarrab, he was a gold trader in Turkey, and at the age of 29, he was in charge of a business empire responsible for tens of billions dollars worth of trade between Turkey, Iran, and some third countries. However, he got arrested in Miami for evading UN sanctions and violating some UN embargo against Iran. What makes this case really interesting for the international audience, however, is that the story doesn't start in 2016 March. The story actually goes back all the way to 2009 and 2012 when the US administration had a trade embargo against Iran because of Iran's nuclear ambitions. As you know, when the United Nations or some developed country pushes for trade embargo against a country, it doesn't necessarily mean to blocking the country from trading from the rest of the world. It usually means that the country can trade, but it cannot receive cash or liquid assets, cash-like assets. So what happened was, in 2009 and 10, from the top of the Obama administration, Turkish government has been warned that several Turkish state-owned banks were used as channels to actually buy natural gas from Iran, but instead of paying in different commodities that the Iranian population needs, the payments were made in gold and in some currency, and then later on we found out that it was actually a balloon. It was a fake trade between the two countries where there was a lot of massive corruption scandal. And that corruption scandal actually broke out in Turkey in 2013 December. And many top Turkish government officials, their sons, and including Mr. Zarrab, were arrested. However, the Turkish government, instead of taking this to either to the court system, justice system, or to investigate in the parliament, President Erdogan, then Prime Minister Erdogan, actually went into a massive purge. This is before even the failed coup attempt in 2015. This ended actually with tens of thousands of police officers and thousands of judges and prosecutors losing their jobs, and some of them going to jail. And later on, of course, the later installed judges and prosecutors cleared all the accused from the charges, and the politicians were again cleared, quote unquote, in the parliament. So what happened was, when Mr. Zarrab decided to come to the US with his family, he landed in Miami in 2016 March, and he got arrested. But later on, something really even more peculiar, more interesting happened, which was the number two guy, the second in command of one of the major state-owned banks that were used to violate UN embargo against Iran, Halkbank, ended up in US as well, and the authorities arrested him. His name is Hakan Atilla. Now, this case is now currently, it seems like this is a case against these two individuals that have been instrumental in a massive violation of UN embargo against Iran. But as the story unfolds, as some of the witnesses come forward and the prosecution is actually bringing case after case how deep this ran into the corruption scandal that started in 2013 in Turkey. Now, what makes this even more interesting is the identity of these people who got involved in violation of the UN embargo against Iran, in addition to the corruption in Turkey, plus the ministers. I mean, the economy minister, the vice president, vice prime minister, I should say, deputy prime minister in charge of the economy, Ali Babacan. We are talking about Zafer Çağlayan, who was a minister of the economy at the time, who were actually pushing some of the government agencies and bureaucrats to actually not to stop this illegal trade. Now, another interesting fact that has been unfolding in the court in New York, also, this didn't stop them from actually not only violating the UN embargo against Iran and making payments in gold in exchange for natural gas, but also creating a ring of bribery. We are talking about $9 billion worth of bribe paid to the Turkish politicians and bureaucrats at the time, and this bribery actually involved some fake trades between the two countries. As Mr. Zarrab in the court explained in detail with graphics drawn, that he would actually make it look like that he was selling, I don't know, some wheat from a country that there is actually no wheat to Iran, and use the Turkish banks for payments, and use some of the proceeds to bribe the Turkish officials. So that's why this case is getting entangled with a lot of political things that has been going on in Turkey, has been going on with Turkey's relationship with its neighbors, and some of the Turkish officials bribing actually some Trump administration officials, Trump cabinet members, the Michael Flynn case. So it is becoming very revealing about some of the things that the Turkish public has been kept from, because as you know, since the failed coup attempt, President Erdogan silenced all free media in Turkey. As a result of the purge, Turkish people don't have access to the really the details of this trial or what's coming next. So what's coming next, probably the most important short-term effect, is going to be that there will be some fines against these Turkish banks, depending on the reaction of the Turkish government, since some of these banks are owned by the two major banks are actually owned by the Turkish state, and some of the ministers are involved in the decision making. How Turkey reacts to these fines and penalties, it might actually lead to an embargo, and then of course this might get entangled with some of the political claims that supporting terrorism, aiding financially and weapon-wise terrorist organizations, and so on. So we will be watching the details of this case for you, and we'll discuss it in detail in coming weeks.